Hello, government scholars. This is Mr. Johnston, and in this video lesson, we're going to talk about the anatomy of the Constitution, or how the U.S. Constitution is organized. So let's get right to it. We're talking about the anatomy of the U.S. Constitution. And for this video lesson, you do need a pair of headphones, you need a pen or a pencil, and the most important part, you need this graphic organizer to write your notes on. So pick up a copy of this in the classroom. And now let's get right to it. The lesson objective is to complete the graphic organizer and then to be able to explain how the Constitution is organized. So after you complete this video lesson and study it, you should be able to describe how the Constitution is organized into the preamble and the 7 articles. All right, let's get started with the anatomy of the U.S. Constitution. And let's start with a little bit of review. So first of all, let's go back to the Constitutional Convention. That was in Philadelphia in 1787, and at that Constitutional Convention, the framers created the U.S. Constitution. And they were replacing the Articles of Confederation, and they made a new and stronger government. And James Madison was the main author of the U.S. Constitution. All right, so big question for us today is, how is the Constitution organized? And it is organized into articles, sections, and clauses. So let's talk about those. The articles are the major divisions of the Constitution. Articles are written laws. So that's the major division. There are 7 articles in the U.S. Constitution. Those articles are then divided into smaller sections, and the sections are divided in smaller clauses. So you've got articles, sections, and clauses. 7 articles. The articles are divided into sections, and then the individual things in the sections are the clauses. So that's how the Constitution is divided, and let's talk about those different things. So first of all, we've got the preamble, which is not an article but an introduction, and then there are 7 articles. So I want you to know the basic idea of each of these 7 articles. But let's start with the preamble. The preamble is an introduction to the Constitution. It gives us the first 3 words, "we the people," which shows that the government is based on the people and the idea of consent of the governed. And it's in the preamble where it says, "we the people," in order to form a more perfect union. There's one of the first purposes. There are 6 purposes. Form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. So the preamble is an introduction to the Constitution, and it gives us 6 purposes for the Constitution. All right, let's take a look at Article 1, which is the longest article, and it describes the legislative branch, and it tells us how the Congress is organized. It tells us the requirements for representatives and senators, gives us powers and limits of Congress, tells how laws are made, and tells us some of the other responsibilities of Congress. And we'll go into all of that in more detail later. But first of all, Article 1 is the longest article, the first article, and it describes the legislative branch. All right, let's look at Article 2, which tells us about the executive branch. So that's what it describes. It gives us the powers and limits of the president and the vice president. It describes the qualifications and responsibilities of the president, and that's Article 2, about the executive branch. Article 3 tells us about the judicial branch, and it, of course, establishes that judicial branch, and it sets up the Supreme Court as the nation's highest court. So Article 3 is about the judicial branch. Article 4 is about the states. It outlines the relationship between the various states and the relationship between each state and the federal government. So Article 4 is about the states. Article 5 is about the amendments. Now, remember, an amendment is a change or an addition to the Constitution, and Article 5 explains how to change the Constitution through amendments. That process is not especially easy, but we have made 27 amendments to the Constitution. The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights, and then there are 17 other later amendments. So we've got the Constitution. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments. And then there are other amendments, amendments 11 through 27. So you might want to pause the video here and make sure you've got your notes filled in. And then let's go on and talk about Article 6. Article 6 is basically the Supremacy Clause. This is the part of the Constitution that declares or says that the Constitution is the highest or supreme law of the country. This article also forbids religious tests, and what that means is our politicians do not have to practice a particular religion. There's no regulation about that. It also states that the U.S. will pay its debts. So Article 6 is called the Supremacy Clause for the most part. And then let's get to the last one. Article 7 is about ratification. So this one is already behind us. We no longer use this anymore, but this was used when they first wrote the Constitution. And to ratify means to officially approve. And so this was the part of the Constitution that explained the process for ratifying the Constitution. All right, so that's a quick look at the anatomy of the U.S. Constitution. Make sure you've got your graphic organizer all filled out, and that's it for Anatomy of the U.S. Constitution.